The gender gap in Wisconsin's construction industry is slowly closing, reaching an all-time high at 10% in 2022.
But as WMTV's Phoebe Murray reports, there's still work to be done. She spoke with one Madison native working to cultivate a female-led workforce.
We have a branding issue.
In a career and industry that is heavily male-dominated.
Image problem, I guess, for lack of a better phrase.
Anna Stern sees the untapped potential for women to enter the construction workforce.
That's why with some of these industry-wide events, what we're trying to do is show a different world of construction.
As VP of Tri-North Builders, a construction management firm in Madison, she helped to create She Builds Wisconsin, a gender diversity initiative giving young girls a taste of the trades.
Girls can do a bunch of things that the guys can too.
Targeting middle school aged girls, the week-long free offering at Madison College,
things that you would see in the office and in the field,
brings together female leaders from Associated General Contractors of Wisconsin.
From the engineering, the planning, the architecture on the front side of a project, and then walking through the steps.
The mission of this camp, addressing the significant shortage of women represented in the construction industry.
I think the future's looking bright, and we're really excited to seeing this younger generation of females enter our workforce.
Build the path a little bit further.
Stern notes once you have the interest,
it's really, really important to kind of look back and give that hand up.
Retention is key.
Make it easier for the next generation to kind of come in and do more.
Stern sees mentorship as that path forward.
Some of my advice would be don't be scared.
Building a future that is female.
People in this industry are really wonderful, hardworking,
in Madison,
kind humans.
Phoebe Murray, WMTV 15 News.
And Stern's advice to young girls exploring a career in construction is to seek out apprenticeships or internships at an area company.
Next summer, Stern is working to organize She Build Wisconsin camps, not just in Madison, but across the entire state.
And this story is airing as part of a series on WMTV 15 News to celebrate diversity, the people and organizations who shape our community and make it vibrant, and those who demonstrate inclusiveness.
If you have a story idea or someone we should know about, go to our news app or website and click on Submit a Story Idea.